Hello, hello, and welcome back. Oops, forgot to take my earbud out again. There's a fly in this room, so be warned if you see him flying around. There seems to be 2 flies in every room of my house, no more, no less, and if I kill one, there's still 2 flies in every room of my house. I don't understand how this is happening, but I suspect some sort of interdimensional fly scenario. Anyway, today we are here to do a video where I asked you something and you answered me. Those are fun, right? I hope so. As you may or may not know, we talk about writing things here on this channel. When we're not talking about bookish things, we're talking about writerly things. There's a lot of intersection there. I am a published indie author and also a developmental editor, so writing is a big part of my life. And also, therefore, writing advice. I give a lot of writing advice. I receive a lot of writing advice. It's inescapable. And if you're just anywhere on any part of the internet where you're talking about writing, it seems like somebody has advice for you. And hopefully by this point, we all know that writing advice is just that. Advice. It is not a rule, it is not a law that you have to follow. It's just something that has worked for someone else that they would now like to see if it worked for you.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
That's the most important thing about advice. If it doesn't work for you, you don't have to take it. Anyway, I asked my viewers what is their favorite piece of writing advice that they've ever gotten, ever given, ever came up with on their own. What is their writing advice? And maybe some of it will resonate with you who are watching right now. I have got their replies down here on my tablet, so if you see me looking off screen, that's what I'm looking at. You can totally see it reflecting on my glasses as we speak. These are in no particular order of importance or anything like that. Just take the advice as it strikes you as something useful. Now, the first one that I see is definitely one that a lot of people gave and one that I definitely think is a useful piece of advice for all of us. Again, there's definitely going to be somebody out there that this advice doesn't work for, but for most of us, I feel like this is pretty universal safe advice to give, and that is you cannot edit a blank page. You have to just write. Even if it's awful, you can fix it later, but if you never get anything on the paper, then there's never gonna be anything. This person says, just keep writing. You can always edit later. You can't edit an empty page, but you can edit a first draft. Several people I know gave that advice, and I think that that is some of the most universal. If advice is going to be universal, that is the most universal. As follow-up, this person says, I tend to criticize my work too much, sometimes so much that I even get scared to start a writing project. But this advice is huge if you can actually follow it. It really is. And I agree. This person says, quiet moments matter. Too often the pauses are first on the chopping block in pursuit of pacing, narrative efficiency, and word count because nothing is happening. While it specifically might make sense to cut them, you can leave your reader feeling like they're being dragged behind a galloping horse. So yes, deleting quiet scenes just because they're quiet is not actually doing your book any favors. And I talk about it, I think, in the read-along that I'm doing about action and rest and the importance of the rest scenes and what rest scenes can do for your story. Because just because it's a quiet scene or a rest scene doesn't mean that you're not still doing important story things, plot things, character things, world building things. Should all be happening, even in a rest scene. And if you're concerned that you're cutting too many rest scenes or don't know which scenes to cut, hi, hello, I'm Julian Greystoke and I'm a developmental editor, so I can help you figure out if those scenes that you love are doing what you want them to be doing. It can be so difficult, nigh impossible to tell if you've written the book, if it's doing what you want it to be doing for other people. Same goes for me. If I've written a book, I need to have other people look at it to tell me if I've actually done something that's working. So one of the ways you can find out is by hiring a developmental editor, and you don't have to hunt for one because there's one right here. Anyway, back to the advice. This person says, trust your audience is one of my favorites because it gives me permission to be clever and subtle and not get caught up in how clear a thing is, at least in the first draft. Love that advice. I'm definitely a proponent of trust your audience. And then in the beta process for me usually is when I tweak, where I realize, ooh, that was too subtle. Nobody's getting it. I need to like amp this up a little bit. Or, ooh, I hit that one a little too hard and they get it. And maybe I need to take it back a little bit. They also have a second piece of advice, write your islands. Also is one that I really like. Even though I prefer to write each scene in order, sometimes I want to write a scene that comes up later and that's cool too. There's no guarantee I won't be rearranging scenes later anyway, so there's no real way to know if I'm even writing in true order. So I think write your islands kind of means like it's okay to write a scene like separate of everything else because you'll connect to it later. This person says if you've written a scene where nothing changes, cut that scene because that means there's no point of that scene. Now see, this is the piece of advice that I actually disagree with. This piece of advice might 100% work for somebody else, but for me, I kind of disagree with it. And of course, the classic, write shitty first drafts, you can't fix what doesn't exist. Yep, there it is. There's the old, you can't fix it if it doesn't exist, and it's still true. But change isn't the only thing that can happen in the scene that moves the story forward. So not every scene needs to have something change, and specifically looking for scenes where nothing changes and cutting them out could, I think, harm your story, because we can also use scenes not just to change, to further the plot, but also we can find out more things about characters. Now you might argue, well, that's a change, because it's changed how much the characters know about each other. So possibly an argument could be made that anything could really qualify as change. So maybe this point really does work. But for me, if you've written a scene where nothing changes, feels a little bit more like saying those slow scenes, cut them. That's probably not what this viewer meant necessarily, or even what the advice meant. That's kind of what it sounds like. So I guess this is a good example of be careful about taking advice maybe too literally sometimes. Maybe I do that sometimes. I take advice too literally. Figure out what the advice means to you and see if it's applicable to your book. This person says, never accept anything you've written until it comes alive for you, until it pulls you in and along so that you don't feel the weight of writing it. If that happens, you've likely created something of worth. Again, gonna slightly disagree here because writing is not always gonna feel beautiful. It's gonna flow sometimes and it's gonna clunk sometimes, but the book still needs to get written. Now, ultimately, you should like the thing that you've written, but again, hi, hello, I'm Julian Greystoke. I'm a published author, and I can't reread my books, or I'm going to want to fix them more. And you might be like, well, Julian, if you want to fix them more, then you probably shouldn't have published them. You don't understand, friends. I'm glad for you that you can feel so accomplished about your book and feel that it's perfect, but I will edit forever, unless I eventually hit publish. I'm going to get it as good as I can tolerate. And then I put it out into the world and I say, off you go, child. Don't come home. Like, I can't reread my stuff because I always want to fix it. I always want to tweak it. I always want to replace that word. I'm always going, oh God, why did I write that? Why did I write that? Because it's mine and I can't not see the flaws. No matter what, I will always see flaws in it. So I just have to publish it at some point. Get it as close to good as I can and publish it. So if you read this advice and you feel like that really resonates with you, then amazing, use this advice. But if you're like me, this advice doesn't totally work because sometimes writing is clunky as fuck and you're gonna butt up against those scenes that just feel just the most awkward to write, and you still gotta get them written, and you might be like me and just hate everything you've ever written and just have to put it out there eventually, and it's not gonna feel beautiful. It's gonna feel awkward and painful, but you do it anyway. You do it anyway. I will say that I have to be passionate about it when I'm drafting. Even if I butt into scenes that I don't enjoy writing in the moment, I have to be passionate about the story while I'm drafting, just the story in general, or else it is worse. Like, I have baited with books that I just forced myself to write and I wasn't passionate about them, and my beta readers could tell. They were like, we can tell you're not passionate about this. And I was like, okay, all right. Important takeaway, you got to be passionate about it on some level. even if you are not always feeling like it is beautiful and like it's flowing. This person says, read your dialogue out loud. It helps it to sound more natural. I think that's perfectly reasonable advice. Reading stuff out loud is often a good way to tell if something's working, not just the dialogue. This person says, instead of show, don't tell, describe, don't explain. This explained what show, don't tell was supposed to mean to me. So yes, show, don't tell can be confusing advice, and it does really actually mean describe, don't explain. I have a video about showing and telling, so you can check it out if you're interested, but yes, that's basically what it means. Also, when I finally listened and started to cut my ing verbs and adjectives, my writing became so much richer. Again, I am not against adverbs or ing verbs, but you should save that shit for places where it really helps and works and brings out the story. If it's plopped everywhere, it loses all its potency. This person says, one that I found super helpful in editing my first novel. This mainly applies to first person and close third person perspective. Every sentence on the page needs to matter enough to the POV of the character for them to mention it at all. If the character doesn't care about something, there's no reason to include it in recounting their own story. And by extension, no reason the reader should care either. This is great for finding filler to cut or ways to make bland but necessary exposition and even little descriptive passages more interesting. That is, I think, a really interesting piece of advice, and I definitely find it to be true, especially with me and my world building I've talked about before. When I world build, I only include things that the characters know, that they want to learn, or that they care about or encounter. If the main character or characters don't interact with some portion of the world building, then it's not necessary and I don't include it. This person has 3 short and snappy ones. Write the story you want to read. I agree, definitely do that. You can't edit a blank page. We see that one come up again. And finally, perfect doesn't exist, which I can't agree with more. This person just says the advice of kill your darlings, which has come to mean a lot of things in the writing world. What it really means is to be ruthless in your editing. Be ruthless. Don't keep that scene that isn't working just because you love it. If it's not doing anything, if a bunch of readers are telling you that it is not working, cut it. Same goes for characters, plot points, anything. You have to be ruthless in your editing. However, all advice comes with a however. Every single bit of advice comes with a however. Sometimes it's okay to be a little bit indulgent. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to overindulge. But sometimes it's okay to be a little bit indulgent. Like, I'll tell you a secret. Readers like the indulgent scenes too. However, again, and even that comes with a however, don't overdo it. Like, cut 1, maybe 2 indulgent scenes, A-okay. More than that, you're pushing it. Depends on the book. Yes, do be ruthless in your editing. Don't be precious about your own book. I know it's really hard to do because we love our book. We wrote it. It is our baby, but we can't be precious about it. We have to kill things. What it doesn't mean usually is to kill off beloved characters. That's what it has come to mean a little bit. Like, if you're thinking about killing off that character for the pathos, go ahead and do it, girlfriend. But that's not what kill your darlings originally meant. And honestly, I don't particularly like the advice of kill off characters because you like them. This person says, if you're ever stuck in a certain spot and can't figure out where to go, read back the last couple of sentences, paragraphs, and usually what's tripping you up is somewhere in there. Interesting piece of advice, definitely. Something to think about. I don't know if it necessarily applies to me, but definitely try it if you're struggling with that. This person says, it's okay to use brackets to leave a section to come back to later if you cannot get past it. Yeah, I know many authors who do that, who will be like, leave the little note for themselves that's like, fight scene here, or kissing scene here, or whatever, or like, look up this or that, especially if you're a pantser like me. I have often left myself notes like, look this up better in depth. Name this later, things like that. This person says, nuke your stories. Start over if things feel confusing and you might surprise yourself. Not advice that I necessarily adhere to, but if that sounds like it might help you, definitely give it a shot. Also, treat characters like people, give the characters agency, but also listen if they don't want to do something. I agree. As we all know, I'm one of those obnoxious authors that Jenna Moreci hates, who talks about my characters as though they're real people. This person says, trust your audience. I've gotten much better at writing concise and strong prose. When I start editing, I realize half of what I wrote is just over-explaining minute details that I hinted at. Yep, we've already talked about this. Totally agree. Trust your reader. Get rid of all that extra stuff. Like, it's okay to put the extra stuff in there when you're drafting. Totally acceptable. But then you gotta be able to get rid of it. This person says, don't write a longer book than you have to. If you have a plot that is great for 200 pages, don't make it an 800-page book, where most of the extra words are just main characters' meandering thoughts. It won't make the book better if it's longer than it needs to be. Too many writers seem to think long books equals better. I agree here. I tend to be a short book girly. I know it doesn't look like it if you've seen some of my books, but that's because I also kind of prioritize large print in my books because I want them to be easier to read. So my books tend to be thickums, but also the print is fairly large. But in general, I also love a novella. I love a short book. If it doesn't need to be longer, don't make it longer. I agree with that advice. This person says, help save the trees, reduce your production of cardboard characters. But seriously, make little character bios and include cultural and social touchstones, especially if the characters are not from the same place. Use these on both granular writing and interpersonal levels. I'm not huge on making character bios. My character bios tend to just be like pertinent information that I've already put down on the page and I need to remember later because it's going to come up again. If I made that character left-handed, I'm going to need to know it later. If I said that they only wink with their right eye, later I'm going to be like, they winked. Fuck, which eye? But you can get as in-depth with your character profiles as you want. Whatever helps you make your characters feel the most real to you. This person says the piece of advice was for scientific writing, but it stuck with them for years. You're making each sentence do too much work. Sometimes clarity comes from short, simple sentences. Have most sentences do one thing at a time. This is something that I actually struggle with. Sometimes I do try to make my sentences do too many things. Fortunately, my beta readers are helping me sort that out, but yeah, I need this advice actually. You'll exhaust the reader or lose them entirely if all the sentences are long and have asides, like this one. You didn't lose me with that sentence, so I even included my own aside halfway through it. This person says, again, we just have a just write the book. They say, just fucking write it down. You can revise it later. Yup. This person also says, write what you want to read. So important. I think in this day and age of all of this emphasis being on like what's popular, I have to write the next popular thing. You're going to burn yourself out that way, in my opinion. You should just, what you want to write it and figure out the rest later. I don't believe in writing to market. Other people would disagree with me, and that's why this is advice. But just write what you want to write, and you're going to be happier in the end, in my opinion. This person elaborates, I had to recently remind myself of this one. I've been writing a lot of fluffy character interactions because that's what popular books are full of now. But after a hard conversation with myself about whether or not I actually like reading those books, I'm back on track writing the story that I want. Because at the end of the day, you are the book's parent. You are its creator. You are going to be its biggest cheerleader. No one is ever going to love your book as much as you do, so you're going to have to be its biggest cheerleader. Even if you get traditionally published, you're still going to have to be your book's biggest cheerleader. You have to love it, at least in my opinion. We've come to the end of the comments. I hope that you found this helpful. I hope you found some advice to be getting on with. I would love to hear your advice in the comments down below. Also, do you have any other ideas for videos of things that I could ask you guys? Because I like this. This is fun. I love to hear your opinions and share it with the world. As I mentioned before, I'm a developmental editor. You can find me on Fiverr if you would like somebody to look over your book and see how it's doing. I have lots of different options for different levels of where you are in the process, from having written just a first draft to having a draft that's almost ready to go out to agents or to be self-published. Find me on Fiverr. Also, if you would like to check out any of my books, you can purchase them now on Amazon. And if you want to see exclusive content that's not seen here on the regular channel, you can become a channel member, or you can hop on over to my Patreon, where there is exclusive content. Ooh, never seen by the eyes of the regular channel. Ooh. I don't know what this is, but I'm doing it. Anyway, I'll see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
A stranger from the outside.
Greetings!
It's me, Julian Greystoke, and you are my beloved patrons, and you may hear the noises of ferrets in the background as I read all of your names. We have Haley History Nerd, Tactical Hot Dog, Stephanie, Pixelizzy, Rhea, Christina, Cameron, Lady Kragan, Jose, Lunar Muse, AJ, Marshy, Semidark, GK, Scout, Kay, Annika, Jen, Gay Tutter, Constantina, Laknunga, SB Boots, Martha Baggins, July, Bird Anonymous, Sarah, Kat. Boy, the ferrets are just having an amazing time right now. 78 Kilograms of Shade, Veda, Roma, Pansing Pony, Haley, Sam, Kira, Kohikaru, Mooney, Pudamancer, Kirsten, Bear, Jojo Bookish, Robin, Ursula, Caitlin, Jessica, KJ, Lafone, Mufflier, Celia, Alyssa, Deborah, Afra, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Marween, Kit, Hidden Glade, Light Julie, Belle, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, and Sarah. Thanks so much for being my patrons, both those of you who have been around for ages and those of you who are brand new. Love you all. In like a parasocial way. I don't actually love you because that'd be a little weird. But love you in the way that I love that you're helping me out with my channel. So I'm gonna stop talking now.